this group is gonna talk about English as an international language. So we're going to discuss why the language that we use as our academic tool is and has been so powerful for so long, and probably it will be still powerful for a little while. So, well, girls, I already allowed you to share your screen and you can start setting it up. And whenever you're ready, we can start.
Recording in progress.
Let me start recording today's class and let me know if you can already, yes, you can already have control of the class. Okay, guys, whenever you're ready.
Okay, well, good morning, Professor. Good morning, classmates. We are Daisy Zuniga and I, Natalie Mutis. And today we are going to talk about English as an international language. Well, before we start, let me mention the content and the order of our presentation. First, we will talk a little bit about the spread of English in the world. Then we talk about which people speak English. After that, we will focus a little bit on English as an international language and English as a lingua franca. Then we will play a little game. And after that, we will talk about the variations of English, continue with the attitudes toward English as an international language, and we'll continue with cultural conceptualization of English. So we close our presentation with a small activity, and it will be all of our presentation. So with that said, let's start. Well, the spread of English in the world. So through our career, we have seen subjects that give a detailed account of the spread of English language globally. For this reason, I'm going to make a brief account of the periods of English from its beginnings to the way we know it today. The history of English language really started with the arrival of 3 Germanic tribes who invaded Britain during the 5th century AD. These tribes are the Angles, the Saxons, and the Jutes. These tribes crossed the North Sea from what today is Denmark and northern Germany. And at that time, Britain was inhabited, and well, that the inhabitants of Britain spoke a Celtic language, but most of the Celtic speakers were pushed west and north by the invaders, mainly into what is now Wales, Scotland, and Ireland. The Angles came from the England, and their language was called English, from which the word England and English are derived. So after these events, 4 crucial periods are established for the history of the English language. The first period is Old English. This is developed between the years 450 to 1100 AD. In this period, invading Germanic tribes spoke similar languages, which in Britain developed into what we now call Old English. So Old English did not sound or look like the English that we normally speak. So native speakers now will not have a great difficulty to understand. Nevertheless, about half of the most commonly used words in modern English have Old English roots. Words like be strong and water are a good example of that. Later English was heavily influenced by North Germanic, specifically Scandinavians or Old Norse spoken by Vikings, who invited settled many of the northwest of England. The roots of these dialects were similar to Old English, but the grammar was different. And well, additionally, with the introduction of Christianity, Latin and some Greek words were added. The Old English period formally ended shortly after the Norman conquest and was spoken until the late 12th or 13th century. The next period is the Middle English. Is comprising the years 1100 to 1500 AD approximately. And in 1066, William the Conqueror, the Duke of Normandy, invaded the conquered England. And the new conquerors, called Normans, brought with them a kind of French, which became the language of the royal courts and the ruling and business classes. So for this period, there was a kind of linguistic class division where the lower classes spoke English and the upper classes spoke French. In the 14th century, English became dominant in Britain again, but with many French words added. And this language is called Middle English. Then we can find the early modern English, which covered the years between 1500 until 1800 approximately. Towards the end of the Middle English, a sudden and distinct change in pronunciation that was called Great Vowel Shift started. This phenomenon consists in pronounce vowels shorter and shorter. From the 16th century, the British had contact with many people from around the world. This and the Renaissance and classical learning mean that many new words and phrases, especially from Latin and Greek, entered to the language. Also, the invention of printing also meant that there was now a common language in print. Also, books became cheaper and more people learned to read. So, printing also brought standardization to English. In 1604, the first English dictionary was published. And well, finally, we have the late modern English, which began in the year 18 approximately and continues to the present day. The main difference between early modern English and late modern English is the vocabulary. In late modern English, pues obviously we have many more words arising from two principal factors. Firstly, the Industrial Revolution and the technology created new words. And secondly, the British Empire and its help covered 1/4 of the Earth's surface. Also, the English language adopted foreign words from many countries. So now, to complement what I explained, I would like to show you this video. Next slide, please, Stacy.
Language has existed for a little over 1,500. English in the world. The English language has existed for a little over 1,500 years, which, in the grand scheme of things, is just a blip in the history of human language. And an even smaller blip in the history of humankind. The language is called English because of its associations with England, which sounds straightforward enough, although it's actually a bit more complicated than this. English had its roots here, in the north of Europe, although of course it wasn't called English then. There were a number of Germanic tribes, the Angles, Saxons and the Jutes, who crossed the Channel. It wasn't called the English Channel until the 18th century, and fanned out across the island of Great Britain, which at the time was inhabited by Britons who spoke Celtic languages, the ancestors of Welsh, Scottish Gaelic and Cornish. Before the Anglo-Saxons arrived, the Romans had also colonized large parts of the island, along with people from various parts of the Roman Empire. Later the Vikings came, and then the Normans, all speaking their own languages, and also mixing their languages with English. It wasn't until the 14th century that English became properly established as the language of England and was used for the first time in Parliament and in the law. The first king of England to speak English as his native language was Henry IV. Henry came to the throne in 1399, almost 1,000 years after the Anglo-Saxons arrived. But once English was established, it also began to spread, or more accurately, it began to be spread. The most important driver for this was colonialism. In lots of countries, English pushed out the local language and indigenous forms of English developed. In other countries, English existed alongside the local languages, and new forms developed. In the 20th century, it continued to spread through the entertainment industry, politics, the media, and technology, so that today it's a truly global language. Throughout its history, it's always changing. And will continue to do so, far into the future. English in the world.
Okay, now let's talk about those who are users of or speakers of English. Jenkins explained that due to the spread of English around the world is often discussed in terms of three distinctive groups of users. They are the users of English as a native language, users of English as a second language, and users of English as a foreign language. Now I want to explain you these terms a little bit. And well, first, the English as a native language. It is also known as English as a mother tongue. It's the language of those born and raised in one of the countries where English is historically the first language to be spoken. So for you guys, what will be examples of countries where English is historically spoken as a first language?
Australia.
Yes. What other countries? You don't know? Yes, the US. Well, good examples could be, as our partner said, Australia, the US, Great Britain, New Zealand, Canada. There are countries where English is historically spoken as a first language. So their English speakers are approximately 350 million. The next one is English as a second language. And it refers to the language spoken in a large number of territories and countries such as India, Bangladesh, Nigeria, among others, which, these countries were once colonized by the English. So the speakers are also the number around 350 million. And finally, we have the English as a foreign language. So English as a foreign language is the English of those whose language has no purpose within their own countries. So generally, they learn the language in order to use it with native speakers in countries such as United Kingdom and United States. The number of EFL speakers is likely to be around 1 billion.
Well, now we are going to talk about how the expansion and how the spread of English in the world become broad, broad what we know nowadays as the English. English as an international language. We are going to talk about a little bit the difference between lingua franca, and we will start. We know that nowadays the English that we know had been influenced and have a long history, and a little bit of it Natalie have already explained. But we also know that there's also some countries that not only have English as a second language or as a foreign language, or even they don't have just one native language. So we know that there are different countries that have more than one. So for example, we could have Egypt, we could have Greece, Spain, Singapore, and Switzerland, and other more who not only have one native language but have a lot of them. So for example, here there are some examples. In Egypt, people speak as their native language Greek and as well as Arabic. And the example that we know very clearly is Spain. For example, they speak as native Catalan in some places of Spain, Valencian, and also Spanish. It doesn't mean that they speak just one, but they use the three of them in different regions. As well, we have Singapore, like have Malay, Tamil, English, and Mandarin, and also, for example, Switzerland, that have four: German, French, Italian, and Romansh as the native language or official language of that place. So, could you help me giving more examples of what other countries speak more than one official language? Do you remember any?
India.
India, yes, great. Yes, India has like 23 languages. So you could imagine how diverse it is. Any other?
Russia.
Yes. Any other?
Well, Canada with French and English.
Yes, of course. Well, there are plenty of them, and as it says here, around the world is 7,000 no language, and some country has more than one official language, and there are plenty of them. So you could imagine if in one country could speak at least 4 official language, you could imagine how diverse just the country it is. For example, Russia, it has 24 languages. So you could imagine how difficult it would be, like the communication between them. I don't imagine how it could be. But is so diverse that the I imagine or I think that the different language that they use depending of what is the purpose that they are going to say, to whom they are talking to also. And it would be like a mixture of language. So with this in mind, taking into account that in the world have a lot of language and all of them are so different, um, how we could ensure the communication with each other across language boundaries. What do you think? Or for example, another questions. If we use just one language with that kind of country that has plenty of language in it, can be one truly an international language? How we could like guarantees the communication? What do you think? I know that this question is kind of difficult because anyone has the answer. So for these reasons, we learn different language because we want to communicate with others. We want to ensure that we are able to express ourselves with others. And it is true that there are an international language. Well, we are going to see a little bit in this presentation. What does it mean an international language? We know that English around the world is known as the international. When you have a travel, so you have a meeting with someone with of different culture, of different language, most of the time English is used as the mean of communication, at that bridge that is going to help us to communicate with others. But what doesn't mean that English is an international language? Well, when we talk about international language, we refer to it as a vehicle of global communication, whose aim or whose goal is to facilitate the way we communicate with each other independently of our native language. For that reason, English is considered to have become the international language, most because it has allowed to communicate across, it could be linguistic or cultural boundaries. It doesn't matter if I speak, for example, in Russia, with the 24 languages, English, because English is the international language. But in what sense? It could be in the local sense, in within one country, on the global sense around the world, because of this broad use and growing community of English learning in that multicultural context. So you are going to find everywhere someone who speaks English. It doesn't matter if it is not a native language or a second language. That's why it is an international language. But what is in itself an international language? What is what we refer to? Well, English as an international language is used to communicate cross-cultural communication. That's to say that with international language, we try to communicate across cultures, across national boundaries, because we tend and we need to communicate and break the limits of barrier when we communicate with other people from different countries. And of course, as it is an international language, we need to frame it in terms of the user of communication and the expression of culture. So it means that one primary function of that English is enable us, the speakers, to share, to express ourselves with others, our ideas. It doesn't matter if we speak different language or we are from other cultures. So taking that into account, an international language doesn't internalize cultural features of native speakers. So if English is speaking as a native language, as Natalia said, in UK, New Zealand, Canada, and all those places, it doesn't mean that it need to internalize that cultural feature of those places. No, to the contrary, as it is an international language, it prioritizes the individual culturalities because when we speak and use English as an international language, it itself, the language, becomes embedded in the culture of the country in which we are using it. So with that said, what sums up everything? Well, when we use English as an international language, we allowed native or bilingual speakers to broaden that language barrier for broad sociocultural process. And in that sense, author McKay proposed a different purpose of communication where English is developed as an international language. But what are them? English as an international language can be developed from the local sense and the global sense. What does it mean? That the use of English for speakers of diverse cultures and language belong to one country. So it would be the use of a particular language to use depending on the context, to whom they are talking to, or for example, the purpose. As I explained before, for example, the case of Russia that have 24 languages. So in some areas, in some parts, I speak English. So that I could use English as an international language in the local sense because of the diversity of that place, of that country. I am going to be able to use it as, for example, in commercial, educational, or formal contexts. Well, and what does it mean the global sense? To the contrary to the local sense, it is the use of that international language, but with a wider communication, that communication that occurs between countries, because it goes to bring the main function of communication. It doesn't matter if I am from Colombia, a Latin America country, and I'm going to the Asia. I could use it as a global sense. It doesn't matter if it is not in the same continent. This is the function of English as an international sense. Well, based on that, Sharifant 22A identified the use of English with some concentric circles, as you could see here. And they classify and divide the function in English as an international language. What is the function that international language has in the world? So he established three main circles, and they call it inner, outer, and expanding circle. But what does it mean? When we talk about the function of English in the inner circle, we talk about the countries that belongs, the countries where English is used as a primary language. That is to say that it is a traditional base of English, or it is an official language. For example, countries like United States, United Kingdom, Australia, New Zealand, Ireland, and all of them. We have here the example. And in the outer circle, we have that they are the countries that, for example, have English, but with that second language, because there is a historical importance or there is a special significance with that language, English. In that case, it includes countries like we have here, Hong Kong, Bangladesh, Malaysia, Nigeria, Pakistan, Philippines, Singapore, and all of them. And the other one is the expander circle. And what are those countries? Well, the function of that English has in this circle is that English is not an official, it doesn't have an official role. To the contrary, it has, his functions goes to For example, be an aim to the international business and the purpose of what I use it. For example, it includes countries like China, Egypt, Indonesia, Israel, Japan, or Korea. And why they don't have an official role? Because English itself is learned as a foreign language. So in this case, it would be counted also South America countries. So you will hear those examples. There are plenty of the places and there are some here to identify them. Taking this in mind, Colombia, what circle belong to? Any idea? Expanding, of course. Thank you, Diego. So taking this into mind and how we use international English and the sense and the classification of the functioning in the world, how it could be different English as an international language from English as a lingua franca. Do you have any idea? So if not, it doesn't matter because I'm going to explain. When we talk about English as a lingua franca, we talk about it as an auxiliary, as a contact language that is used most of the cases because of routine communication that need to take place because the speakers are from different native language. But what does it mean on how it will be different from the international language? Well, when we talk about English like a foreign language, we talk about it as a language of contact because English is the language, for example, in this case, chosen to facilitate communication. In what sense? Well, lingua franca itself can be English or can be any language because the aim of the lingua franca is to facilitate the communication between different native speakers. So if we choose English as a lingua franca, how it will be the sense of it? Well, we could use it, any speaker of non-native speaker could use it with the purpose of intercultural communication that happens when different first language speakers need to communicate with the bridge with other countries. So English will be itself in as a lingua franca, has bridge that allow interruption within different speakers. So it doesn't matter that English itself is always a lingua franca. Any language that facilitate communication between those speakers could be and become the lingua franca. It depends of the situation and in the context where it's developed. For example, if we know a Spanish with an Italian and a Russian, they don't have the language in common. However, if we think about and consider those three speakers could have one language, speak one language, one foreign language, or it could be English, where you could use it to communicate, or it could be a French. If it is English, English becomes the lingua franca. I know that we have already saw the lingua franca in so many courses and subjects. So now we are going to do a short activity to warm up and
Yes, we're going to do a little activity. So Daisy, can you please send the link on the chat
Yes,
while I
give me a
explain?
sec.
Well, while Daisy sends you the link, I'm going to explain you what you have to do. So on the link, you can see some terms that you have to explain, that we have explained during the presentation. So what you should do is to order the definitions or match the definition with the meaning of the word. And if you open the link, you can see on the right side of the screen the definitions, and you have to match it with the term in the left column. So for this, you have 5 minutes. So when you finish, you can tell us, and we will socialize the answers. Well, I'm reading the message on the chat, and if you want, we can do it together. Are you?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think it's better.
So you can see my screen? Yes.
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 Okay.
Well, who wants to start with the first one? Old English.
I think that the first one is the one that says developed between the year 450 to 1100, the period where they inviting the Germanic tribes. No?
Okay. Okay, well, the next one is lingua franca. Who wants to do it? Okay. The next one is English as a foreign language.
I think that one is okay.
Yes. The next one is early modern English.
It's okay too.
Mhm. The next is English as a native language. So maybe, I don't know. Laura, can you give us the answer of that?
I think the one that is there is the correct answer.
English as a
I
native language?
disagree. I think English as a native language is the one that says also known as English as a mother tongue.
Exactly. The next one is late modern English. Maybe Sharon can give us the answer for that. Sharon.
Well, I'm not Sharon, but I think
Don't worry.
I think it's the one that says that continues to the present day.
Yes. And well, the last one is English as a second language. And by deduction, we can say that is an international language that has allowed it to be used in multicultural contexts to communicate across linguistic and cultural boundaries in a local sense.
Well, but that meaning is English as an international language, not as a second language.
Ah, okay.
Isn't it?
Sorry. Yes. So, well, the answer for that was for English as a second language, right? Is to language spoken in a large number of territories and countries which were once colonized by the English. So after finish that,
Okay, so I just read a question. Sorry, I shared my screen. I couldn't see the chat. And the question is from Ivan. In content like conference, meeting, and business transactions, it is then a lingua franca. Yes, lingua franca, it says it will be used like the foreign language that is used in those contents where the speaker don't share the common language, native language. So it is used in those contexts to facilitate communication in those conference, meeting, in the educational contents, in the commercial context, political contents and all those contents. It happened there, the lingua franca. I hope that it is clear. Okay, sorry for not read the question before.
Okay, well, now let's talk about the language variations. So the terms often used to describe the varieties we are interested in are new Englishes or word Englishes. So it has become customary to use the plural from Englishes to stress the diversity to be found in the language today, and to stress that English no longer has one single base of authority, prestige, and normativity. So these variations are presented by Rengen, Mester, and Braff in the following categories. The first one is the metropolitan standards. So the term will have once been applicable only to a standard English of England. But long after US independence and its subsequent exposure of distinct American English norms, to acknowledge the existence of at least two metropolitan standard varieties, whose formal models are those provided by the radio and television networks based or principally in London and USA cities like Washington, Los Angeles, and Atlanta. Then we can find the colonial standards. This is more related to the colonial history of English, and that colonial history has made an important language in Australia, New Zealand, Canada, South Africa, and Northern and Southern Rhodesia, now Zambia and Zimbabwe. A fairly large number of English speakers formed an influential group of speakers in the early history of these dominant territories. So these varieties spoken are referred to an historical dialectology as extraterritorial Englishes. Then we have the regional dialects, and these are the varieties that may be distinguished on the basis of region variations with the metropolis and colonies, and thus English dialects of the UK and USA are clearly definable in regional terms. Also, we have the social dialects that are varieties identifiable within a region along the lines of class and ethnicity. For example, in London, there is the difference between Cockney and working classes. Also, we have the Pidgin Englishes, and well, Pidgins are defined as rudimentary languages that have no native speakers, so they may subsequently gain in complexity. They arise from trade and other largely colonial forms of contact. So English-based pidgins like West African Pidgin English may be considered to belong to the English family, since they are lexified by English, because English is the source of much of their vocabulary. Now, the Creole Englishes. Creoles are fully developed speech forms, which shows so much restructuring as to bear little resemblance grammatically to their lexifiers. A lexifier is the language that provides the basis for most of the vocabulary of a Pidgin or Creole language. So often, this language is also the dominant or superstratum language. The next slide, please. Yes, thank you. The next one is English as a second language. Well, typically, these are varieties that arose in countries where English was introduced in the colonial era in either face-to-face communication or more usually via the education system of a country in which they are. In ESL countries like Kenya and Nigeria, English plays a key role in education, government, and education. The next one is English as a foreign language, and well, this refers to the English used in countries in which its influence has been external. As I mentioned before, well, for EFL speakers, English plays a role for mainly international rather than international purposes. It could be for business, for traveling, among others. So, whereas ESL countries produce literature in English, for example, EFL countries typically do not use English in creative writing. As I said before, it's more due to globalization and for economic, communication, and cultural that the EFL is used. Some example of them is China, Europe, Brazil, among others. Then we have the immigrant Englishes. And in the context of migration to an English domain country, varieties of English, which originate as EFLs, may retain some distinctiveness or many merge with the regional English of their territory, depending on a host of social and economic factors. A good example of that could be the Chicano English of the USA, that shows greater affinity with general USA English. However, the Chicano English is still a distinctive variety among many speakers, which is classified as an immigrant English. Also, we have the language shift Englishes, and these are varieties that develop when English replaces the old primary language of a community. The jargon Englishes, that whereas a pidgin is a well-defined variety, they have norms that are tacitly agreed upon by the speakers. So jargon is characterized by great individual variations and instability. And finally, we have the hybrid Englishes. This kind of English is also called bilingual mixed languages, and these are versions of English which occur in code mixing in many urban centers, where a local language comes into contact with English. The next one, please. And additional to this, we also have the indigenized varieties of English. For the indigenized varieties of English, the names used for them are the following. First, we have the non-native Englishes, and well, this is I consider that a great term. It's really important to know that. And it is because this term divides the words of English speakers into two, the native and the non-native, and treats the native as the norm setter and the non-native and the norm receiver. So the non-native speaker was considered as a perpetual learner striving to reach perfection in the native speaker's variety. The next one is the new Englishes, and it was suggested to counteract the negative connotation of the non-native, and to reflect the fact that these varieties have only recently become salient in terms of research efforts and status recognitions. Some of the new Englishes are chronologically older than some of the native or older Englishes, but as I said before, they are called in that way new Englishes because they have been recently highlighted. Also, we have the indigenized Englishes, and well, it's still in the line with finding an adequate terminology. The term indigenized reflects the struggle for legitimize them, and a standard is consistent with the position that every dialect has its own set of distinctive features and norms by which a speaker is identified as a typical or no typical member of the community. Also, it is used principally to describe indigenized varieties of English, and the indigenization affects all language in new environments. Then we have the localized regionalized and domesticated Englishes. So, well, English had to be localized in order to become the particular language spoken by certain communities. It can be applied to other languages too. So for that reason, the evolution or restructuring in the language in this context that is localized are different from what happens in other contexts. And finally, okay, well, no. Then we have the nativized Englishes. And these terms shows or considers that English language is immersed in the community in which it has moved. So at this moment, it is currently impossible to use the word nativization for these variations, since these terms refer to the result of those productive linguistic innovations, which are determined by the localized functions. For example, the culture of conversation and the transfer from local languages. And to conclude this part, we have the second language, English. So based on the premise that post-colonial contexts are multilingual and that English is foreign to the speakers there, it could be normally to think that or seen English as a second language. So all native speakers of English are first of all native speakers of non-standard dialects. So there are also L2 users of the standard variety of language.
Well, now we're going to talk about a little bit of the attitudes toward English, taking into account those varieties of English that could exist. As Natalie has explained, there are plenty of them. So when we talk about English, about the use of English in any context, it could be educational, like we are here right now, or in the commercial one, on any other. Most of the time we hear of apply the belief that if we speak a foreign language, in any case, in this case, English, with a standard pronunciation, it could sound better, more valuable, or even more formal or correct. So that is why, for any reason, learners tend to prefer or have a natural choice toward the native speaker's pronunciation. It could be the British or American pronunciation. So, but we need to take into account that we as learners of that foreign language, in this case English, um, our first language is going to influence in any other way how we sound when we speak that foreign language. So with this in mind, how is perceived English had that international language? We need to take into account first that as it is an international language, there is no a native variety of English that should be used as a model of language teaching, of language learning, because we need to take into account and leaving aside that belief and include the exposure of that different forms of English that appear in that international context. We know that we could speak the same language, but the influence that our first language could have is bigger. So we could use the same language, but it could sound different. So in this sense, the resources and approaches that we use to project that learning of the English or the use of English shouldn't be based on that standards language of models of all the time, because we have that influence in as learners, and we couldn't like take that away because we as learners and learners of that foreign language, we have one first language. So for that reason, English in this case is international. In the same way, the concept of international language should also take into account the cultural aspects that are associated with language learning. That's to say that all those multilingual forms that influence and are also part of the learning and experience of using second language as the mean of communication. So it is important to take into account that cultural aspect that influence. For this, we should not focus or orient ourselves on a monolingual context. It could be British or America in the participation of programs that incorporate language training, because English as a foreign language or as an international language needs to incorporate that perspective of the use of international, that inculturality, that bilingualisms, that biculturalisms, transculturalisms, and all that, to give a vision, giving a vision of English as it is, as it is, and speaking English in the world, taking into account the cultural and linguistic variety that it has around the world. It doesn't sound the same English doesn't sound the same as in Asia. English doesn't sound the same as in Latin America, or how it could sound in England or United States. That influence happen with our first language, and it is what makes English international, because it comes from biocultural diversity, and it is a bilingual context that influencing that. So with that said, sir, what are the cultural conceptualization in English? As we say, there are attitudes, and everybody speak different and use English in different ways. So with this in mind, we will view how the different of a cultural concept perspective could change the conceptualization that happens in English like an international language in speech situations. So cultural contextualizations happen when I use English and I use the expressions, but my cultural background like influence the way I perceive what I am listening to. So we could say that cultural contextualizations influence our minds in perceiving that contextualization in communication. In the communication we are sharing with others of different culture, of different languages. So in this case, as international English as an international language, that conceptualizations are influenced by our cultural worldview, with our life experience, or maybe with our expectations, because how I perceive, how I use language, and how I understand that is influenced by my culturalization, and happen to have cross-cultural misunderstanding. So we need to understand that even if we share or use a language, a foreign language, in this case English, to communicate with others, it doesn't mean that we could perceive that conceptualization on what we are saying in the same way, because our cultural background or cultural view of life experience influence what we receive or perceive, even if we are using the same language, in this case English. So we need to take into account that when we're communicating with a group of foreign people who doesn't have the same first language. So what I perceive could be different of what an Asian could perceive of expression or a phrase. So we are going to see a short video about a little bit about this cultural contextualization that could happen when we use English as an international language in the context, in the global context.
In all the exuberance associated with negotiating new business relationships between China and the West, too little attention has been paid to managing conflict in those relationships, and conflict is inevitable. As the story I'm about to tell you illustrates, confronting conflict, by which I mean how do you tell a person there's a problem that needs to be fixed, is handled very differently in the West than it is in East Asia. Jeff, one of my executive education students, told the story of the rattling bicycles. He had a contract with a German buyer for bicycles that he was having manufactured in China. Shortly before the bikes were to be shipped to Germany, Jeff went to the plant to check on them. When he got there, he and the plant manager took a couple of the bikes off the line, rode them around in the countryside, and Jeff's bike rattled. He thought the plant manager's bike rattled too. So when they got back to the plant, Jeff handed over his bike, and then he turned to the plant manager and commented, "I think my bike rattled." And then he went back to Hong Kong. When Jeff ended his story, there was a stunned silence in the room, and then a flurry of questions. "You just went back to Hong Kong? You didn't check all the bikes? You didn't tell the plant manager that the Germans wouldn't accept rattling bikes?" "No," said Jeff. Finally, someone asked, "Well, why not?" And Jeff explained that he knew the plant manager knew why he had come. He was afraid that if he confronted the plant manager directly, the plant manager would lose face. He would feel disrespected and he would feel embarrassed. And in revenge, he might ship the rattling bikes. But Jeff thought if he was respectful, the plant manager would get the job done, fix the bikes, and ship them on time to Germany. Jeff understood the difference between direct and indirect confrontation of conflict. In the West, when we have a conflict, we tend to identify the problem, assign blame, and assign responsibility for the fix, and even tell what we think needs to be done. In East Asia, it's done much more indirectly. There's a signal that there's a problem and an assumption that the responsible party will take responsibility and fix the problem. So if you're a Western manager working in East Asia, my advice to you is to be aware of subtle signals about problems and conflict. You might hear, for example, the term, "that would be difficult," or when you ask a question, you might get a story back in response, or you might hear a metaphor. It's okay to probe. What was the protagonist in the story thinking about, would you say? Or how's this metaphor interpreted in China? But what you don't want to do is point fingers, because in East Asia, people take roles and responsibilities very, very seriously. If for your peace of mind, you really have to make clear there's a problem that needs to be fixed, state your problem in tentative terms. Don't be definitive. Engage your counterpart in defining the problem and in defining the solution. Now, if you are an East Asian manager working in the West, I advise you be prepared for confrontation. Try not to take it personally. Try not to be defensive. Try not to withdraw. Instead, engage the other party in understanding what the problem is. Don't take the problem to the boss. In East Asia, it's very common to involve the boss very early in the conflict. But in the West, managers are supposed to resolve conflict themselves. So instead, engage your counterpart, work together collaboratively to identify the problem and fix the problem. Just a little bit of cultural sensitivity to direct and indirect confrontation of conflict can really pay off. It did for Jeff. Those German buyers not only accepted the bikes, but they reordered.
Well, there's an example of how even when we use the same language, it could be cultural misunderstanding or these kind of things, even when we try to explain ourselves in the best way possible, the cultural difference, even if we speak the same language, have like a big influence of what we perceive. So I think that we could do
In all
our
the ex-
cultural activity. So could you enter to quizzing, please? So we could enter to quizzing with the code. So I hope that everybody could join in the game. Or I could share the link here. So we have 7 people and we are 20.
We are 15.
Ah, yes, it's the professor, sorry. We miss 5 people. Okay, we are 14, so we are going to start. I don't know who is missing, but I think that we could start.
Yeah, I put the same.
Sorry, what are you saying right now? You are answering this question?
Yes.
Yes.
What? I don't know what happened. Sorry, what happened here?
But it was Godzilla.
I don't know what happened, sorry. I prepared the lesson, but I
All of
haven't
this was
here.
to motivate you to answer,
Sí,
to be
yes.
focused, to be focused. Obviously.
I think that we can join another time because the real one. This was practice. To the Okay, let's see. Okay, I think that we could start. So
No, please wait.
no,
No.
no. I don't know if this is the code. You can join. Or
Ok, ya, ahora sí, ya.
okay. I think that we have finished. Everybody have finished? Okay, we're finished. Let's see who wins. Very good, Sharon. You are the first one. Laura and Karen Gutierrez. Wait, it was great, 100%. So I hope that you understand everything, and I think that we could like look up very quickly the questions. What do you think of the answer? What was the like more difficult question to answer? All of them were easy. So let's start. The content language used to enable intercultural communication has a bridge between groups of people who speak different native language refers to. It was very easy. English as a lingua franca. So
Maybe this
think-
one, the ones that one person answered incorrectly to clarify doubts could be this one.
This.
Now,
Considering
I have
okay,
a question, the one about indigenized English, that was difficult.
Yes. So indigenize was this one. What do the indigenized English refer to? What do you answer?
I chose the one about a dialect that has its own distinctive features.
Yes, it was correct.
Yes?
Yes. Yes, when we talk about indigenous English, we refer to the dialect that has its own features and norms in the community. Doesn't follow the standard ones of any other.
Okay.
What else? Anyone has another doubt about the questions? Or maybe this one. Considering the concentric circles to classify the function of English in the world, South America, does it belong to? What do you answer, guys?
Expanding, yes, of course.
Exactly.
Why, Diego? Yes, that's right. And we use it like English, like a foreign language, not as a second or native language.
This one was easy. What is the language variety that is distinguished on the basis of regional variation? What is the answer? Maybe Karen can help us with the answer of this question.
I put regional dialects.
Exactly. The regional dialects are a variety of language that is distinguished on base of the regional well, variation of that language.
Well, indigenized, the one indigenized Englishes, we already answered. That
Yes.
is own dialect that has its own features and norms in the community where it's used. The other one is language chief English is developed when English is replaced the primary language of a community.
Well, here the answer is true. These varieties are developed when English replaced the old primary languages in a community.
So the one that is like kind of easy and very funny of it. I would like to know your answer. What kind of variety do you perceive while speaking English? Any volunteer for the? Yes, of course. This question doesn't have like a correct answer. It's like depend of you how you perceive while speaking English. What kind of variety do you could perceive in your speaking? So it doesn't have a correct or wrong answer. It could be regional, like Diego said. Okay, yes. The metropolitan standard. Right. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your participation. And this was it. We hope that you could understand what we have explained. And these are the reference.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, guys. This topic is so nice because it makes us think about some things that are somehow normalized inside the field of social linguistics, but they still sound very biased and very race driven. For example, the fact that there are some Englishes that instead of being just English, they give the tag of indigenized or things like that, that traditionally, although we know that there's nothing wrong with being indigenous, there are some people that still use that term in a despective way. And that as linguists, we know that the people who name those Englishes with those names actually mean that because they didn't sound original, and I quote quotation marks. So as linguists to be, as experts in language to be, we need to question those labels. We need to see if they truly work, if we will still talk or refer to them that way, or if we find other ways, or just the way to just say that English is English. Remember that all of those labels, categories, and connotations come from the political and financial influence that the regions have on the world. And we know that even if lots of centuries have passed, still the United States and England are the countries, and Australia and New Zealand as well, and Canada, are the 5 countries with more money, more political influence, and somehow best life quality. So there are different authors from Holiday to Pennycock to others that actually say that because of those lifestyles, when we talk about English as a global language, we don't only include English speakers as the ideal to follow, but also their hyper capitalist and first world structure as the ideal life standards for everybody, even if we are not from those countries. So there's lots of things to think about. And the reflection again is pretty much the same, that even if there are countries all over the world that are independent from those countries, and even if we are supposed to be individual countries, we're still mentally colonized and under the influence of English. So there are lots of things to think about that. And tomorrow, the next group is gonna tomorrow. I'm crazy on Monday. On Monday, the next group is gonna talk precisely about how English has become also an empire, a socio-political and economical empire all over the world. So why did you get scared? Why?
Because you said tomorrow. And I was like, what?
No, it's because I was confused, because tomorrow I do have social linguistics class, but not with you guys. So that's what I was like confused, but no, it is on Monday. You're gonna talk about linguistic imperialism, and that topic is going to be a very nice complement for what you learned today. And the discussion will be on and on, but from different points of views. Thank you very much, guys, for having come to class. It's always a pleasure to have you here. See you next week. Have a lovely rest of the week and lovely weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor.
Sorry, Professor.
Thank you, Professor.
Yeah,
Thank you for it.
Yes?
I understood wrong, but I thought that we were going to do I don't know, like
A workshop.
Yes, you are.
yes, workshop or something
Yeah.
like that.
Yes, you are going to. Actually, I already have ready. The thing is that I haven't been able to put it on Moodle because for some reason I couldn't open Moodle since yesterday. I don't know if you have normal access to it. Can you enter to Moodle normally?
Yes.
Because yesterday I was trying to upload it, but it was impossible. Actually, yesterday I had to teach my syntax class under my personal Zoom because it was impossible to join, like, or I don't know if it's my computer, but I couldn't join under the UI's website. So I had to teach with using my personal account, and it was annoying because every 40 minutes we were kicked out. Anyways, so I'm going to upload it. The idea is that you're gonna have a couple of days of deadline so you can actually work on that in groups. I'm gonna let you decide who are you gonna work with, maximum 4 people. If you prefer work individually, it's fine. I hope I can send it today through Moodle. If I still have problems with it, I will send it to you via email. So beware both options, okay?
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, guys, have a lovely one.
Thank you.
You too.
Bye,
Bye bye.
Profe.
Bye.